Hey guys, Denver Rogers here, and in this video, I want to talk briefly to you about Paul the prisoner. Now, some of you might say, wait, Denver, don't you mean Paul the apostle? Or maybe Paul the convert? No, I quite literally mean Paul the prisoner, because today we're going to be exploring Paul's ministry activity while in prison. If you're unacquainted with the man I just mentioned, it'll benefit you to know that Paul was once a zealous Jew that sought to imprison anyone that professed Jesus Christ as Savior. At least until that same Savior encountered him on the road on his way to imprison more Christians. Ever since that faithful encounter, Paul committed his life to spreading the gospel to every known corner of the world. Now, Paul had experienced more adventures and misadventures in the ministry than most, and the book of Acts does a superb job of chronicling his many journeys. Through the eyes of Luke the author, we see Paul's stellar conversion on the road, his various evangelistic missions, and the Lord using him to raise a young man from the dead, amongst many other larger-than-life stories. We witness firsthand his fiery passion, his willingness to go anywhere and share Jesus with anyone, his defiance of the status quo, and his love for Jews and Gentiles alike. These are the parts of Paul's story that we love the most. Even as he struggles to win converts in Athens in Acts chapter 17, we root for him as he preaches the gospel with conviction and power. For decades, Paul lived his life bringing Jesus to the world. And yet something happened to Paul that seemed to serve as a bit of a snag in his sprawling ministry: his imprisonment. Now, Paul had been imprisoned before, as we first see in Acts chapter 16. But this last time was different. This time, Paul's imprisonment would lead to his eventual martyrdom in the hands of the Roman government. At this point, Paul can see where this road is leading, and he knows that his time is short. This is heavily alluded to in 2 Timothy, the last letter that Paul ever wrote. Many of us in Paul's shoes might have been tempted to succumb to fear, discouragement, or doubt. Paul was a world-class leader in the modern-day church. His network amongst the Christian believers was staggering. Opportunities to share Jesus with even more people was ever present. And yet here he was, captured, imprisoned, and under trial. Paul could have easily given up in prison, and there's no question that he might have been tempted to. So what did Paul do while in prison? What was his perspective? Let's take a look at his own words to the Philippian believers in Philippians chapter 1. It says in verse 12, "Now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. And because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear." Verse 20, "I eagerly expect and hope that I will in no way be ashamed, but will have sufficient courage, so that now as always Christ will be exalted in my body, whether by life or by death. For to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain." Wow. So here's Paul, imprisoned for his faith. He knows that he's not getting out anytime soon. And yet he sees all of this as an opportunity to spread the gospel to even more people. Paul could have looked at his bars and chains and said, you know what? This is it. This is the end of the road for me. I've done everything that I can possibly do, and now I'm going to spend the rest of my days in a Roman prison. But this is not at all how Paul sees it. He looks at his circumstances and understands that God has a purpose for him in the midst of his situation. He takes every opportunity to share the gospel with every single guard that he comes into contact with, to the point that the whole palace guard knows that he's a witness for Christ. While that alone might be astounding, this is not where the apostles' prison ministry ends. Paul fills up his prison time with writing letters to the surrounding churches, encouraging, teaching, and strengthening them. These are the books of Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, and Philemon. To this day, believers across the world benefit from these spirit-led books, all because a man found his purpose in his imprisonment. The truth is that God didn't just have a plan for Paul the convert or even Paul the apostle. He had a plan for Paul the prisoner. Our circumstances can neither hinder nor limit the plans and promises that God has for our lives. In fact, God will oftentimes use our current situation for the benefit of his kingdom. As Paul shared, the gospel was in fact being furthered as a result of him being in prison. Had he not been there, the gospel may never have found its way into the palace guard. Not only that, but books that are so crucial to our faith and theology today may not have been written. As you're watching this video, you yourself might feel limited in your purpose by your current circumstances. You might feel boxed in, cornered, or deprived of opportunity. You might be saying, oh, if only I had the money. If only I lived in a different place or had a different job. If only my life weren't such a mess. I could be living in God's purpose for my life right now. But I encourage you, dig deep and find God's purpose for your life in this moment, in this situation. You might feel stuck, but God has a purpose for you in the middle of this struggle. As you walk through this current situation in your life, allow the Lord to cultivate and develop a passion and a vision inside your heart. If you don't know what your purpose is, ask the Lord to reveal it to you. In doing this, you will find God's plan for you in every situation. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video. Take care and be blessed.